Hey guys, it's John here from Sonic Drive Studio. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to Me and My Les Paul, episode 1. I love my Gibson Les Paul Custom a lot. It's basically a new dream guitar that I got a couple of months ago. Now, if you haven't seen my in-depth demo and review of this guitar, do check it out as well, up here or down here if you're interested. But yeah, man, I just love playing this guitar. It plays great, it feels so smooth to play, and it also sounds awesome. And I also really dig the pickups, especially the bridge pickup for heavy rock and metal, of course. It just has a great sort of snarl to it in the mid-range that really works well for high gain tones. And in this series, I simply am gonna try this guitar through all of my amplifiers eventually, I hope. And the idea is that for one episode, I'll basically write some music, especially for that amplifier with this guitar. It's just a fun little journey that I wanna take, and I hope you'll enjoy it too, and that you'll go along for the ride. And in this first episode, I wanted to play this guitar through this amplifier, which is my Victory Amplification Super Kraken VX100, for some nice and aggressive, clear, percussive, and tight metal tones. Now let's take a listen to the riffs and tones that I've come up with, and then after that I'll walk you through the settings and the signal flow and all that good stuff, because I did take some extra steps to get the tones as awesome as they sound. Okay, let's take a listen right now. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that. I really had a blast working on those riffs with this guitar through this amplifier. The Victory Super Kraken really is a unique sounding amplifier, as you heard. It just has a very tight and percussive low end basically, and a very raw mid-range, with a lot of articulation and also a huge low end. And by the way, I also did an in-depth demo and review of this amplifier on the channel recently, which you can check up here or down here if you want to learn more about this amplifier and hear more tones. But in this video, of course, we're purely going for the high gain metal rhythm tones. Now on the Les Paul Custom, I am using the bridge pickup, which is what I always do for rhythm tones, and I'm sure that all of you do that as well. And this is the Gibson 498T pickup, which comes in all the sort of standard Les Paul Customs. And like I said, I really like the chunk, power, and clarity that this pickup has without getting too harsh or shrill. So it does have a very nice mid-range cut, but also with a nice and thick low-end percussive sound basically. And on the Super Kraken, we're using the Gain 2 channel, which is the most aggressive and high gain channel on this amplifier. Now, I'm not using the preamp or power amp focus switches this time. The preamp focus switch is basically a sort of pre-pedal or a pre-boost, sort of tube screamer type voicing that you can add to your tone, but without it, the tone was more than tight and percussive enough, so I left that off. And by leaving the power amp bass focus on the back off, the low end stays a lot bigger. And by the way, this guitar is tuned to drop C sharp, and the strings that I'm using are just a set of 10s by Elixir strings, which are the strings that I like to use always. So in terms of amp and guitar settings, the basic setup is quite simple. However, this amplifier does not have a presence control on it, so depending on what type of speaker you pair it up with, it sometimes can get a little bit dark. In this case, I wanted to pair it up with a Mesa Boogie 4x12 cabinet with V30s, for which purpose I used the York Audio MES 412 OS cabinet. And in order for it to sound bright enough with that cabinet, I did use an equalizer in the loop to make it sound a little bit brighter, and basically to emulate what a presence control usually does on an amplifier. And of course, I used my MXR 10-band EQ for that purpose, this little pedal over here. And as I said, I'm just boosting a little bit of top end here with the 4, 8, and 16K sliders, just a sort of high shelf that goes up a little bit. And it basically adds a little bit of air and brightness to the tone, so that's very nice. And if you also have this amplifier, the same amplifier or perhaps the lower wattage version of the Kraken, and if you also find it a little bit too dark sounding sometimes, just put an EQ in the loop and you can fix it by adding a little bit of top end. Now let's take a quick listen to the amplifier without and with the EQ on so you can hear what I'm doing with this pedal. So as you could hear, without the EQ it's a little bit dark sounding, but the EQ pedal opens it up quite nicely. Now the Super Kraken is also a little bit of a noisy amp, at least in my setup. All that gain and clarity tends to do that with these sort of amplifiers basically. And in my setup I have the amplifier and then a reactive load, which is the Redseven Amplification Amp Central, in a loop of my XFX3. And those types of setups with those loops just tend to introduce a little bit of extra noise usually. Nothing we can't fix with a noise gate though, so in the XFX3 I am adding a little bit of noise gate in front and after the amplifier as well. So the amp is being fed into the Redseven Amplification Amp Central, as I just mentioned, which is a great reactive load, and then into the York MES 412 OS cabinet, as I also just mentioned, on Mic Mix 01. I tend to use that IR a lot because it just sounds awesome for high gain tones, modern high gain rock and metal tones basically. I did double track the guitars. That tends to make them sound a bit bigger and wider in a recording. So one is panned all the way to the left and the other all the way to the right. No additional processing was applied in the DAW aside from a simple low cut at around 85 Hz, just to get rid of the low end rumble. That space is reserved for the kick drum and the bass guitar. And now let's take a listen to the riffs again, but this time with just the guitars isolated. Here we go. Great! Nice and raw, sort of filthy, gnarly, tight, but also with a big low end and a nice and clear top end. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed this first episode of Me and My Les Paul. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons down below along with the notification bell, because that really helps the channel out. I'd hugely appreciate that, so thank you so much. And you can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Cheers!